Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 82. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at BJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at NerdJourney. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome, Nick. Hey, so today we're talking about kind of an amalgamation of topics.
Right, starting with a debate on hot coffee versus cold brew, and I'm going to tell John why he's in the wrong for liking cold brew.
Listen, I didn't say that it was my favorite thing to drink, and honestly, I don't drink that much of it, especially now that I'm out of the office and I don't have access to it for free. But no, that's not what we're actually going to be talking about. We're kind of addressing or revisiting this issue of stress and anxiety because of the job burnout, and this trend that we've seen about companies giving mental health days. And so maybe talking a little bit about the best or really good ways that we found of using a structured day off. So with that in mind, let's jump straight into it. What was the first point that we were going to talk about here?
So we found a really good article about how vacation won't actually cure burnout. And I have to say, that's not something that I thought about before I read this article. I'm not sure why, but I just didn't. So if you're someone who's on the verge of burnout, think about the episode with Josh Fidel, episode 78. He got to the point where he, had surgery, checked himself into the hospital, and was home for months and months and months. If we think about the normal vacation, it's probably a week, maybe. Could be a couple days. Could be 2 weeks for a lengthy stint, but it's not an inordinate amount of time like maybe a leave of absence would be. But during our vacations, what we find is, hopefully, assuming we have the coverage and can turn off email and such, we have some time to just decompress a little bit, ignore what's going on at work, hopefully, and just be. Hopefully you're going somewhere with your family or someone you're close to in your support network, for example, and just having a little bit of fun. And you may or may not be leaving the house. I don't know. Some people do the staycation, but it feels pretty good to be on vacation and not feel the pressures of work when they were getting to you before that. I will say it seems like everyone knows you're about to go on vacation the week before because it just piles up and you're trying to tie up loose ends. And then when you come back, you get dragged back down pretty quickly because the world doesn't stop just because you're out of office. Even if you had someone covering you, you're still going to have some work that's piled up by the time you get out back into the office. Wouldn't you say that's the case, John?
Yeah, I think it's very rare that you're actually able to take vacation and have all your work covered and not have to worry about things piling up while you're gone. That's a rare role, and it's a rare organization that would actually enable that. So, yeah, that's, inevitably, like if you're taking time off, this idea that, you're not having to think at all about what's going on with your job like that. I haven't been able to really do that well. Like, every couple hours I'll be like, oh, geez, I wonder what's happening, and can you really turn off work email, while you're on vacation and not get notifications, stuff that you're getting carbon copied on, that all those kinds of things. So, it's a well taken point.
I've known people, it seems like there's a debate among some of our peers as to whether they actually check their email while they're taking time off, or whether some people will even go to the extent of removing it from their phone, or if you're like me, go somewhere where you don't have internet connectivity. My wife likes to go on cruises, so obviously not right now, but in the past we've done that, and I didn't buy the internet package as a way to stay away from things. But
Sure. Yeah.
it seems like if you're gonna go total cold turkey and ignore email and everything, it might be hard to do at first. I think that probably takes a day or two to just stop or get out of your system. And then once you've tried to cleanse yourself and gotten a little bit used to ignoring the office, when it comes closer to time to go back, some people get that doom feeling like, oh, I know there are going to be a million things waiting for me. So it could sabotage the end of the vacation.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think your point with Josh was really well taken. Right. That was episode 78,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that even after the end of his leave of absence, he wasn't ready to come back and actually, go back into the exact same situation. So, just being away didn't address the things that he was, that were making him unhappy. And maybe that is, an important lesson. Like if you're on the path towards burnout, just time away isn't going to fix that.
Right.
Right.
But it's interesting because, in Josh's case, and I'm sure this has probably happened to some of us too, you mentioned it's hard not to think about what's going on at work. But the time away from being in the work might at least give you some insight into what is the underlying issue that's wrong. Or
Mm.
what, maybe, it just
Hmm.
depends on how reflective of a person you are if you can pinpoint that. What's going on that's causing me to burn out? Is there a behavior that I'm exhibiting? But what really stinks is you identify the problem, but don't have time to do anything about it, and you have to jump right back into the situation that is causing the problem.
Right. Right.
And I think that's really the main point that this article makes is, okay, I might be able to figure out what's wrong, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to necessarily take actions to fix everything.
Yeah. I think another interesting point was identifying the problem, but the problem is that your entire identity is tied up with the work that you're doing. Like that's a big, big issue. if you're if you're burning out, but also can't stop doing it because like, you identify with that work so much that changing that doesn't seem like a possibility, right? I only want to be a part-time surgeon. You know? I need to take a step back from doctoring. Like you know, maybe it's that does happen, and I'm just ignorant of it. So,
Yeah.
um,
The whole take, I'm going to not work anywhere for a year and just travel the world because I need a break and figure out what I want to do next. That's not really feasible for most of us.
yeah, yeah, very true.
But
Even with unlimited PTO, do you think is that not something you could
yeah,
do?
well, I've never tried to take a whole year off. I'll have to ask my boss and see what he says.
All
I mean,
right,
he's a
makes
nice
sense.
guy. You never know.
Yeah.
I just need you to hold my spot for 1 year, boss. I'm not asking that much. What about maybe some ways that you can help yourself when you're back at the office
Sure.
after you've had this hopefully enjoyable time, hopefully vacation, taking time off, it can be enjoyable for you, but once you get back, some things you could do to switch it up are taking breaks. Now, if you're someone who's working from home right now because of COVID and a bunch of other things, it's hard when you're on back to back to back to back to back calls all day, 8 to 5 or past that, to find the time to take those breaks. If you're eating lunch during a conference call or just grabbing a snack with your 5 minutes that you get to go to the restroom and get a drink of water and eat something before the next meeting, that's a total beatdown.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that scheduling those breaks is pretty important. This is kind of like a tactical thing, right? If the thing that is, really wearing you down is too much scheduled time, and I think you and I chatted about this, is like, if all you're doing is sitting in meetings, you don't actually have any time to do the things that the action items that you're taking in those meetings. It's just meetings all the time. Um, so, one tactic that we have is actually scheduling time on your calendar that's blocked off to do the stuff that you need to do. And then, actually putting in the agenda, 20 minutes on this, 40 minutes on this, you know, with a 5-minute break at this time to do, absolutely nothing, so that when that appointment pops up, past you has scheduled the time and it has assigned you the things, and you don't need to think about what it is that you're going to do during that time,
Yeah,
including just, take an actual legitimate 15-minute break.
and I would say schedule and defend. It's one
Yeah.
thing to schedule, but it's another to actually follow through. If you're working, if you have a coworker who needs help and you've scheduled a break time for yourself and you choose to help them instead, you kind of allowed yourself to not take a break.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not putting your self care maybe as high of a priority as it needs to be if you're in this state of burnout or state of high stress and anxiety. Then maybe just taking some time to do an evaluation of what your circumstances are each day. What are the things you enjoyed about what you did? What are the things that caused you stress? Part of the, does this align with my personal values and what I want to be doing and where my skill set is? And maybe there's a misalignment that you didn't realize.
Yeah, I also think that it can be done, very tactically, like in the minute, right? So if you're having trouble concentrating on something, a task that needs to be done, maybe if you in that moment figure out, what's going on, why is it that I'm distracted? Why is it that I um, am unable to concentrate and move forward? Is it that I'm worrying about something else? you know, is that something that I need to address? Is it that I'm uncomfortable, because of, some other thing that's going on that, it's, kind of niggling in my mind in the background, but, I haven't thought about it directly. Those are the kinds of things that, if you can catch it in the moment, then maybe you can put it on the list of things to, directly address later on.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point.
So let's also talk about, addressing the root causes of unhappiness, right? Because this is the main thing here. Um, I think that this is, a much harder task to actually, you know, think through and then take action on if the thing that's making you unhappy is the fact that you're employed by the specific employer, then, you know, actually facing that head on and addressing it and, taking action on it and finding a different position, that's all hard work. So at least, you know like in my experience, like, you know rather than doing things that are difficult, sometimes it's just easier to avoid, to distract yourself, turn the TV on and unplug one's brain, or, other, less healthy ways of coping, you know excessive consumption of alcohol or other recreational drugs, or overeating. There's all kinds of like self-medication things, and that people, those kinds of behaviors that people take on. And what's, again, what's really difficult is actually facing the issues, or thinking through or talking through with your support network, what actually is uh, making you unhappy. Is it a work situation? Is it a living situation? Is it something else? Social stress? Is it family stress? Any of those things, can put you on the path to, tons of anxiety and burning out at work, right? Just the fact that it's manifesting at work doesn't mean that that's what the root cause is. It could be in other parts of your life. So, I think that it's super important to actually, take the time to address those things. Um, and, counterintuitively, sometimes that work is so hard that you do need to take a vacation in order to address those things. So, you know, just going on vacation is not a cure to job burnout, but sometimes, you need to visit like the various support networks that you have in your life. Hey, I'm going to schedule a couple hours to talk to my spiritual support network here. I'm going to spend a couple hours, talking to a therapist, or interviewing a couple different therapists because I don't have one, and I want to maybe get one, or maybe a psychiatrist, or maybe it's a physical symptoms and you need to go to a couple different doctors. All those things are going to take time and mental, and physical energy, such that you can't do those things effectively while you're also doing your job 8 hours a day. So, yes, taking vacation can help when the reason that you're taking the vacation isn't to just avoid all your issues, but to actually directly address them head on. So I think that, just again, just going on vacation, not necessarily helpful, but addressing all those things and taking vacation because, hey, I'm going to have a hard conversation and I need 2 or 3 hours to unwind after that hard conversation, and I just, going back to work isn't going to help me actually unwind, and I don't think that I'll be effective. And then I'm going to have this other conversation here, and I'm going to need time to ramp up and actually have it, and I'm going to need wind down time afterwards, and I can't do work before and after. Great. Like that, you've identified specific actions that you need to take to address the reasons why you're burning out or uncomfortable, and you're taking vacation to give yourself the time and space to actually make positive changes. So again, just taking time off from work and using it to travel, I mean, I think is great, but the problem is if you're taking vacation to avoid rather than to address your issues.
And just remember that the avoiding does burn energy, whether you realize it or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Well, let's transition to the next topic, which was, this movement towards, um, that we've noticed of companies giving mental health days to their employees. Companies realizing that during the age of COVID, and also like social upheaval and Black Lives Matter and protests against police brutality, people are under more stress. They might be under more financial stress. They might be under more, emotional stress. There's all kinds of things that are going on that can cause that. And, they want to address it with time off. So we just talked about how just time off isn't helpful, and we talked about some ways that are like maybe a little bit would take a little bit more extended time to actually like go through. But let's talk about some things that you could do with like maybe a mental health day, or even if your company is not get handing those out, you take one of your own, right?
Yeah. First thing that comes to my mind is try and get outside. Hot or cold weather, hopefully not torrential downpour or anything like that. But there are physical benefits of getting outside and just taking a walk. And that in and of itself can help with anxiety. You know, Studies show that being in nature or around nature in a natural setting is just kind of calming, whether that's a park, green space, or some other comfortable environment. And even if it's a short time, that's still helpful because your brain does work differently when you're in an environment that's calming. Kind of like the whole idea of if your desk is messy, it causes stress. Whereas if your desk is clean, it's less stressful.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can personally attest to this. It might not work for everybody, but it certainly has worked for me. My wife's been taking on the lion's share of the work of tending to our backyard garden. And just recently in the past 48 hours, I was able to step outside and, you know, help prune some of the tomato plants, and um, help trellis the green beans and stuff like that. And I found being outside in the direct sunshine with the wind like moving, to be very different from sitting inside at a desk, staring at a monitor. Maybe that's like super obvious, but the temperature is like, nominally the same. But just being outside in fresh air and direct sunshine, there was something magical about it. And, I don't want to say that it was magical, but it definitely helped. It definitely raised my mood.
It was definitely magical because John showed me a picture of the cucumbers they're growing, and they're pretty large. It seems magical, John.
Oh yeah, those Asian cucumbers.
Yeah, for
Is
sure.
is that the cover art for the episode?
I think so. You just
Okay.
have to ask your wife if it's cool to include that. Yeah, that's good. I recently went on a vacation where it was mostly outdoorsy stuff. Stayed at a cabin in a remote location, built campfires every night, and took hikes. And what's interesting is the time of day where I would normally be kind of groggy and needing a couple extra cups of coffee to keep going, I was actually outside, active, full of energy, and stayed that way all day.
Mm,
And of course, in a better mood.
right. Yeah. So, it's worth trying, right? Just going for a walk, finding a park that's not crowded, still social distancing.
Of course.
If you're listening to this in a time where that's still something that's being done, yeah, definitely.
The next one I thought of was spend time with loved ones or the people important to you. This kind of goes along with your support network. Obviously, people that counsel you in a spiritual manner, someone who might give you advice, but also family members. And interestingly enough, face to face communication reduces depression and anxiety. In a world of remote meetings right now, for people in customer facing roles, they don't get to go out and see their customers right now. And for some of them, that's actually very much depression and anxiety for me. Uh, if you can see your family face to face, and obviously if you're okay with that based on social distancing and things of that nature right now, then it's going to help you build a healthier relationship and hopefully better coping mechanisms for stress moving forward because you've built that bond that the face-to-face communication creates.
Absolutely. Refreshing those bonds with friends and family, if it's face to face, if it's on some kind of video, like all those things can be helpful. It's interesting too how even if you're spending time face to face, at a social distance, um, I've heard of things like social distance picnicking where you're at two different picnic tables, you know 15, 20 feet away, but just speaking loudly to each other, and you're at least in the same space. You get like a whole different experience than even video, where you can see whole body mannerisms, and communication, and like stuff that video is pretty good at, but you don't get everything about it, right? You get this small picture, or you're looking at the picture, which means that you're not making eye contact with the camera, or you're looking at the camera, which means that you aren't actually looking at the picture of the person. So um yeah, I think that those things, doing the best that you can. If that's a video, then that's great. If it's in person, in a safe way, then that's maybe even better. And maybe that just depends on the person, of course. I keep on hearing introverts saying like, oh no, I get tons of energy from being alone, and not having to deal with social situations. If you're an extrovert and you really get energy from being in those social situations, then being socially isolated is probably pretty draining. So you just have to figure out where on that spectrum you are, and you know treat yourself accordingly, right?
Yes, sir. We already addressed the support network, but it's worth another mention. You may spend time with someone in that network. What about hobbies, John? You ever spend time on a hobby to de-stress or relax a little bit?
I mean, if my hobby's watching, videos on YouTube, then yes, definitely.
Yeah, beekeeping, gardening, what else?
Um,
Swing
Chicken
dancing.
composting, homesteading.
Right, right. All those things. But interestingly enough, the hobby, having a hobby helps you cope with stress. And it's actually a reminder that there's more to your self concept than just what you do. The only part of your identity isn't work, it isn't family. That's not the single only part. Yeah, there are
Hmm.
many facets. So it gives you another facet. And if you ever if you ever have an instance where you start doing something and you just completely lose track of time because you're so immersed in it that you didn't think about anything else except being engrossed in what you were doing, that's active leisure. And it lets your brain rest a little, not arrest, but rest a little bit from all the worrying and anxiety that may be popping up. And even if your hobby is similar to what you do at the office, I still think there's value in it. If you're somebody who's technical and you're going to tinker in your home lab, it's not the same as something you had to do as an assignment for work, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of times for people in that situation, you get a different kind of energy, doing something for yourself, you know, whether it's learning, expanding what it is that like all that stuff is very different from something that you're doing, for work. So sometimes you get a crossover and you're excited to learn something for work, but it's not always, not always.
Another thing we should bring up is reading. You ever just sit down and read a good book, whether digital or hardcover, or maybe you listen to a good book? I'm a big Audible fan, but reading for 30 minutes each day has been shown to reduce stress. And if you're reading fiction, it can actually increase your ability to have empathy for other people. And I think that's something that a lot of us are looking for in our conversation with others right now, based on the world as it is.
Yeah, that's an amazing suggestion. I've always been, growing up, I was a huge bookworm. So, um, most of the books that I consume these days is uh, Audible. So that is a really good point. I think that you know, exploring new things and new viewpoints um, via a book, that's a really good way of coping. Like you can even do it while you're maybe doing some of your chores, like stuff that you don't really enjoy doing, taking out the garbage, washing the dishes, those kinds of things. And then if you're getting joy out of the book, an audible book or an audio book, then it makes some of the menial stuff go a little bit quicker.
Yeah, sometimes I'll put on the Audible book and do laundry, like fold a couple loads of clothes that we need to fold, and put a start a load. It takes a little bit of time, but time well spent, and I'm not just doing nothing. It kind of makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something at the same time. I mean, I'm accomplishing the laundry task, but something maybe that I like to do that's more enjoyable, I'm accomplishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that leads into learning a new skill. Maybe you're reading up on something that's going to teach you a lesson, something in nonfiction. Maybe you're training for that next certification, like Manny Sadu mentioned in his episodes. That could be a good thing to invest in on a mental health day, assuming you have the time and didn't decide to spend it with family. You don't want to necessarily take away from that if you really need to spend time with your family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're talking about things here that you would do instead of like pure avoidance, right? Right. Just like, instead of like numbing your mind, with nonsense, taking like doing something active to like really help yourself.
Yeah, and each one of these things can provide some structure to your day,
Hmm.
and that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah. That was a great list. One thing that popped into my mind is, um, structured participation in some kind of, activity like that you do to give back to the community. So if you volunteer for a group, maybe you use that day, to do that, maybe a little bit more intensely than you'd be able to normally. But just another idea that popped into my head.
Sure. Like provide tech support for family members? Is that what you're saying?
Nope, nope,
I'm
definitely not
teasing.
that. Yeah, we're talking about mental health day, Nick.
Right. You mean that doesn't help your mental health, John?
It's like the opposite.
Ah, okay.
All right. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, sir. Just a reminder we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter at Nerd Journey.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at B Journeyman for Nick Corty at Network Nerd underscore, signing off.
Adios. Just a reminder we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. And that is my cat shaking a bell right next to my microphone. We'll remove that.